So the background for this, as mentioned in 2023-2024, we did a project called the Transportation Master Plan. It was adopted in 2024. One of the unique tasks that we had with this plan was to review the school zones. We had our consultant communicate with each of the schools to find out what their needs were regarding drop-off times and traffic and stuff like that. So from that project, we created what's known as a Safe Routes to School report, and that was through the collaboration with the schools, and that provided some recommendations on what we needed to do to help support the schools with what we could do as a municipality. One of the key things we noticed immediately that we could do was the 30-kilometer speed limit transition. Immediately would provide safety to the schools, and so we did that in 2024. So in 2025, what we're going to do is phase 2, as an additional recommendation from the school zones. The Safe Routes to School project is to deal with the parking signage around schools. So that's going to be done this year, as well as to adopt the same speed limit for playground zones and times as well that we had talked about that we were doing from what we were going to do from last year. We're going to be doing that this year. We've just closed our 2025 traffic signage supply and installation tender, so we do now have a contractor on board to do this work. And now we're going to be promoting our information campaign for this, the playground zone change. We wanted to kind of do this sooner, this information campaign sooner, but as you know, signs are made of aluminum and posts are made of steel, and both of those are affected by tariffs. So we needed to make sure that we were going to be able to close on this tender and do this project before we brought it to the general public. So we are able to support this project, even though there are some tariffs. By going early in the year and doing this project and tendering this project, we were able to use some of the existing materials that the contractors have. So the tariffs would be fairly minimal for this project. Next slide, please. So dealing with traffic control, we're working towards a standard. We really want to keep to have a standardization. Keeping uniformity and consistency is the name of what we're trying to do with what we're doing with signs around the city. We just want to generate a better understanding of what we're presenting to the public with signs and communicating the needs that these signs present. We are using the Transportation Association of Canada book that the school and playground area zones, guidelines and application of implementation. The longest title you can get on a document is the one that we use specifically for completing these tasks. It comes with a worksheet, and within this worksheet there is criteria for each playground. There's a weighted a value for each of these things, and then a weighted factor. The biggest thing is the emphasis on what the playground has. It's focusing on young children. It's focusing on playground structures. That's the key to generating whether it's a playground zone or a playground area. When you do the math, it's a score up to 100. As you can see in the middle, if it rates 0 to 40, there's no signage needing. 41 to 80, it's a playground area, which just is the warning sign, the playground ahead warning sign. And then if it scores 81 to 100, then it's considered a playground zone, which you also include the regulatory 30 kilometers per hour signage there. They also have a caveat on the left there. If you can scroll a bit to the left, you'll see section 2.4.4. In all cases, engineering judgment and local considerations should be considered. So they put that caveat to show that this is a limited worksheet. It's a worksheet that's meant to be broadcast to all your green spaces, your sports fields, but you should provide some consideration to what the actual location is. And so next slide. We did review the 30 sites that we do have, sports fields, playground areas, green spaces. Currently 21 are posted with a 40-kilometer speed limit. If you follow that tax sheet specifically and religiously, only 14 signs would require a lower speed limit. But going through and adjusting for some of these engineering things like sight lines, tree cover, and worksheet scores, we've determined that 18 sites will be posted with the new 30-kilometer speed limit. Next slide. So then, what is changing? This will be a quick go through on this slide, and then I got more information for each of these specific locations. Locations that are currently posted 40 that will be returned to a 50K speed limit is Woodlily Park on Woodlily Drive, Regal Heights Park on 13th Avenue, and Optimist Park on Lillooet Street. And the reasons for these is they're collector roads. There's more emphasis on keeping traffic moving through these areas. There's a lot of good sight lines, there's sports fields, and we have some other ideas on how we want to manage making those walking areas a bit safer. There's the second one is locations that we're going to be doing a partial posting, and what that means is there's green spaces that have a playground structure on one side of the park, and then you have a massive amount of green space or a sports field that's creating a bit of an indifference on how this field should be looking or how this sports field should look. So what we're doing with this is there's two spots, Elgin Park on Oxford Street and West End Park on Athabasca Street West, where the road that is connected to at front faces the green space or the sports field will return to a 50, and then the 30-kilometer zone would be more towards the actual playground structures. And I'll show you images as we get through that. And then the South Hill schools also will be returning to playground areas once those schools are transitioned to the new school. Next slide. So this is Woodlily Drive, Woodlily Park. Woodlily Drive is currently posted for 40. It may actually not have those signs up at the moment. I think they've fell down or have disappeared. So that road is going to be returned to a 50K. It is a major collector. What we're going to do for this sports field is put in some pedestrian crossing signs and the ladder crossing there. You can see the little white images there, as well as adding some stop signs and replacing the yield signs that are there. What that does is just gives more emphasis to forcing traffic to stop in and around the green space instead of having the yield where traffic can freely flow through. Next slide. The next park is Regal Heights Park on 13th Avenue. Again, a major collector road is 13th Avenue. There is a playground structure on the southwest, you can see. However, it's a very significant distance away from 13th Avenue. You can park in the green area on 13th Avenue if you want to use that playground, as well as you can also park on Pasco Drive and enter through on the side between the houses there as a pathway. So that the risk of having that playground in that specific area is minimal compared to the sports fields where you wouldn't generally need to have a 30-kilometer speed limit change. So that's going to be changed to return to a 50-kilometer speed limit on 13th Avenue. We're going to be adding those pedestrian crossing on Regal Crescent there. Next slide. The next park is Optimist Park, Lillooet Street. There's a 6-foot fence on the south side of Lillooet Street all the way across that sports field. It directs people to 5th Avenue, and currently that Lillooet is a 40-kilometer. We want to return it back to a 50-kilometer zone to meet the needs of that major collector road. What we're going to be doing is adding pedestrian crossing at that corner, and we also have applied for SGI grant funding to put an RFB on that specific corner, which we'll find out in July. So we're going to enhance the safety of just that corner where people will be crossing. Next slide. Now this one deals with what I was called partial posting. The green space has a split personality. If you look on the left, Elgin Park, Oxford Street is at the bottom, and Hall Street is on the top. The majority, the top 1/3 of this park is where the playground structure is, and then you have 2/3 of green space. So in general, that green space wouldn't require a 30-kilometer speed limit change. So we're going to return Oxford Street to the 50 because it's a collector road as well, and then add some additional signage, pedestrian crossing signage on Oxford Street. And then as you enter up 8th Avenue there, that's when the 30-kilometer speed limit will take effect. And there's lots of parking both on Hall Street and 8th Avenue where people would park to use that playground structure. And then similar to the West End Park on Athabasca, we have a sports field. There's parking to the west of the sports field where you can actually drive in the alleyway and park right up against there. There's ample parking along Hochelaga and 10th Avenue if you want to use the playground structure on the north side of this green space. So then Athabasca Street itself will return to 50-kilometer. It doesn't warrant the 30 kilometers specifically to as you pass by the sports field. There's also a significant amount of topography change, so there's really good sight lines along that street there. Next slide. Some of the unique areas that we want to address with this project as well is the Kinsman Sportsplex. There is a small ball diamond on McDonald Street there. The ball diamond itself doesn't require the 30-kilometer speed limit change. However, what we want to do is extend. Right now, there's a 40-kilometer zone between 9th Avenue and where the M is on the McDonald Street there. And so we want to move the that 40-kilometer zone just further to the east to sort of take in that ball diamond, which could also be used. People can park obviously along Elizabeth Street as well to gain access to that ball diamond. It also plays into the fact that if we do this cricket pitch, it adds a bit more dimension on maintaining the fact that there's going to be a lot of more traffic in this area, and we want to just maintain that 40-kilometer zone through there. Next slide. Crescent Park, also a park that doesn't technically require a playground 30-kilometer zone around the area. However, we do recognize that there is a 40-kilometer zone along Fairford Street. We want to maintain that due to the fact that there is a lot of traffic, a lot of parking, and a lot of use for the pool in the summertime. We're also going to go through and improve all the pedestrian crossing signs and line painting in that area. There is a lot of that already existing, but we just want to go through and update everything to make sure that this park gets the respect that it deserves. I'm also interested in potentially providing or creating some Crescent View Park specific signage directing people to this park. So that's something that we're kind of working with community services with that type of signage. It would be a very specific to this park and direct people to it. Next slide. Grace Street and 13th Avenue, both at one point were posted as school zone areas. Due to the fact that there was some issues with some traffic and kids in the area. I don't remember exactly what happened. I wasn't here when it happened, but the important part of that was to actually improve the crossings. So the crossings that we had were a little outdated, so we've recently put on Grace Street, we put new RFB crossings there. And so we want to just update the signage through there. And also I'm going to be maintaining the 40-kilometer zone through this area until those RFBs are fully utilized and fully understood on how they function and everyone is sort of utilizing them. I don't want to remove that 40K zone until that occurs, until that uptake has occurred. And then also on 13th Avenue, the same thing. We're going to be putting in RFB crossing at that specific location right by the community mailbox there, and as well adding the crossing ahead signage. That area will have the 40-kilometer zone removed because it's neither a playground zone or a school zone. Those are reserved for when you actually drive by or pass an actual frontage of a school or a playground. Next slide. So the next couple of slides here are just some showing which schools will be having the 30-kilometer speed limit change in the summertime or in the next little while here. And then the next slide shows the ones that will just be playground areas. So you can show the next slide. And that leads me to questions.
Thank you, Mr. Erickson. Great presentation. Councillor Boyle.
Just on the 13th and Grace one there, yeah, I think it was because there's and drop-off zones, if I'm not mistaken, historically in that area, just from school, right?
Yeah, it seems to be from. I don't have any. My kids don't go to Palliser, but I believe that's where a lot of the parents have been, just because of the congestion that occurs on Simpson Street. That's what they were using. So, the crossing itself is what we're trying to protect and try to make sure that is the area where people will go and utilize. The RFBs they're very, very good at drawing attention to when there's actually people using these crossings. So once everyone gets used to understanding how to use them, then that's when we can, at that point, consider whether the 40 kilometers is necessary or not. But at this point, to maintain the safety in that area, we want to maintain the 40-kilometer speed limit.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point now because that 13th is getting repaved now. So, and as someone who used to live on 13th there, when they come off Caribou heading north, people are accelerating. And particularly hazardous during school times because there's a lot of kids crossing at that crossing there particularly. So I think that's a good adjustment and there. The other question that I had was, and just to square this in my mind, there's a lot of really great reasonings, but maybe in like and I know it's not a simple, easy answer, but it's, we decreased the school zones into 30, which is a good safety maneuver there. And then in some of these park areas where kids are going, we're going to 50. So you could imagine that when I get asked by a resident, well, how come the school zones went to 30 and the park one went to 50, right? Because that doesn't seem to line up. But
Yeah.
obviously there's reasons for it everywhere here. Is it, or how to answer that question, I guess?
And that's a good question. The majority of the school, or of the playgrounds are being converted to, if you look at that map, most of them are being converted to the 30-kilometer zone.
Okay.
Quite a few of them. It's just these few that I explained some of the anomalies that what we're seeing is the emphasis is keeping traffic moving. When you're talking about schools, you're talking about areas where you know kids are going to be going. They're going to be 5 days a week. You're going to have kids in these areas. So regardless if it was a collector road or anything, we wanted to still maintain that 30-kilometer zone because of the fact that we know kids are going. It's 100% guarantee. 5 days a week, there's going to be kids. Parks are less. You're still going to have the vulnerable citizens of little kids being involved, but there's less probability there's more emphasis on maintaining traffic flow through collectors and arterials with those type of areas. So the emphasis of maintaining is to keep the traffic moving, and still the areas where you would have the vulnerable kids, the playground structures, which are specific to what this manual is focusing on, that's where you want to have the 30K. So that's where you want to maintain a safer area when you know that there's going to be smaller kids.
It looks
in those
like,
areas.
I mean, even those ones were 50 in those park spaces, and you highlighted it, great lines of sight. I mean,
Yeah.
those areas where we feel confident in moving towards that.
Yeah, and a lot of the sports fields generally have parking within the areas. Like a lot of these sports fields then also are fenced, like ball diamonds would be, there's less risk, I guess, involved in having sports fields and green spaces. It doesn't mean that we can't at some point reconsider things, but to draw things down to a 30-kilometer zone is a pretty big change, and we want to make sure that we're applying the correct reasoning and understanding to make these really focusing on when you're traveling through a playground or a school where it's a 30-kilometer, there's a reason why you're doing that. Yeah.
That's perfect. I mean, thanks for that. I mean, this is probably more for when my wife asks me, 'cause she's my harshest critic of all, but appreciate the response.
And we welcome the questions. It's a lot of thought's been put into this.
Yeah, and that's great, and that's just kind of something I was, principal question here, but a lot of it work into this and thought and everything else, and look at the whole areas, and I think it's just good for residents and people to know that these decisions aren't light and come too lightly at all.
Correct.
In any way. So thank you for a lot of work on this. This is great stuff.
Councillor Looning?
Thank you. Well, thank you for the presentation and the report. I just wanted to say and kind of piggyback on what Councillor Boyle is saying. Great work. I'm pleased to see some of these things kind of come together and maybe be stitched in a better way, that it doesn't seem like it's 30, 40, now back to 30, and you know what I mean? There are some areas like that. And so I'm really happy to see that those changes are going to happen. And I think the community will be happy about it as well. Because like I said, there are some areas, and around 13th and that, where there's a playground and then it's a school zone, and then you go on Grace and, okay, is it 30, is it 40? It'll be nice to get that consistency. So thank you for your work on this, and I'm excited to see it roll out. Great.
Thank you, Councillor Looning. I have no further speakers right now, so if I can just pass the gavel to whoever, that's you, right, okay. Thank you, Mr. Erickson, for this, and for everyone who helped you on it. And your passion just always comes through on these projects, and that makes me excited about it. I love the idea of Crescent Park signage something special, and I know you'll come up with something great for that, just like you did with the bilingual stop signs around École de Charme, which I just love, even though I don't speak French. I just think that's just, I like details, and that's a great detail. First, I do have a question. I don't know what RRFB stands for.
Rectangular rapid flashing beacon. It's those yellow beacons that you see. Kinsman Sportsplex has one. There's one on Manitoba. There's one on Thatcher and Forth, which we'd finally completed, and Wood Lily Drive has one as well as Grace. Yep, rectangular rapid flashing.
I was pretty sure I knew what it looked like, but I didn't know what it stood for. And then just my other, I guess, comment, observation, whatever, would be when the new 30-kilometer signs went up and they say 7 a.m. to
7 p.m.,
1700? But it says, does it say 1900?
1900, yeah.
I heard in the community, and I just would wonder if it could say 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. instead of going to the 1900, just because I think it is a bit confusing for people. I actually think if it could say 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. 7 days a week would make it super simple and clear, but just a little thing. It's just a detail.
Yeah, I thought about trying to maintain the consistency of the signs that we already have on the school zones. If we wanted to change that, we'd have to go back and remove all those as well, which the original intent was to, that's kind of like I don't know what the term would be, but it's like, I guess it's the military time. I've had people ask me that too.
I understand. Yeah. It's not a big deal, but, and I like that they'll all be consistent around the city. I just, yeah, my personal preference would have been the other way, but it's all great. And I think this is a great report. And I do think that we'll probably get a little pushback, like as much pushback because we got about 30. Some people will be like, now what are you doing for 50? But it makes complete sense, and it's good. So I'm happy with it. Councillor Boyle.
I'll move the communication CC 2025-0116 regarding the project update playground zone and areas be received and filed.
Thank you, Councillor Boyle. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you, Mr. Erickson.
Thank you.